And hello, welcome to Torn Book Club. This is our, adjust myself a little here. This is our last episode for 2014, and so I thought it was appropriate before the show started to play a little of The Last Goodbye by Billy Boyd. You may know it as the ending song for the Battle of the Five Armies, which I personally thought was one of the better ending songs um, for one of these movies that we've seen, that we've heard. It's it's up there. It's like, for me, it's May It Be, Into the West, Last Goodbye are my top three. Um, but that's that's just a little something for the intro for the show. Um, Today is I stole the ring is saying looks like I'm a little late to the party. You're not that late. We just started. Um, so today is the last episode of 2014, and 2014 is also the first full year that this show has been on the air, so to speak. It started in late October or early November of 2013, so there wasn't really much to talk about at the end of 2013 because there had only been a couple of shows and the audience was just starting to build up. But now, after this year, um, we have a much bigger audience. We've read a ton of books. Um, and so we have a lot more to talk about. So we'll be doing a year in review later today. Um, but before we get into that, just a quick reminder of the One Last Party Kick or Indiegogo campaign, which is still going on and has actually been extended. The deadline was December 20th or December 31st, which would have been in a couple of days, but it has been extended now to January 18th. From what I understand, a lot of people have been saying they want to buy tickets, but won't have the money until midway through January. So we extended the deadline to now it's January 18th, and there are some cool new giveaways. There's a contest or a raffle uh, a, for a menu from our previous Oscar party, which was at the Cat and Fiddle in Hollywood, that is signed by, let's see if I can get it off the top of my head, Dino Gorman, Adam Brown, and God, I want to say William Kircher, but I could be remembering that wrong. But Adam Brown and Dino Gorman definitely are have signatures on there, and there's one more whose name I can't remember, and I apologize for that. Um, but hopefully you'll be able to chip in a bit for it. We're getting closer to our goal. It would be nice to make that goal. So yeah, the deadline's been extended to January 18th. Check it out at Indiegogo.com. Just search for The One Last Party, and you will find us. So hope to see you there in February. Rovandir is saying, found out that I'm not going to have any income for February, so gonna save as much as possible. That's a shame. I'm sorry to hear that, Rovandir. Happens to many of us. A lot of us are struggling, me included. And Light of the King was saying, haven't been able to read the book of the month for this month. Was reading Unbroken instead. Oh darn! How dare you read something else? No, I'm kidding. Unbroken is a great book, so totally worth your time. I wish you the best of luck, Rovandir. If there's anything any of us can do to help, please let us know. So, as we go into, so let's begin the discussion for the book of the month, which was The Martian by Andy Weir. And I don't know how many of you out there have read it. Um, hopefully, hopefully some of you have. I've actually read it twice already. I loved it that much. Um, so, little little quick description of what The Martian is about. Um, it takes place in the near future. Um, with it's not the first manned mission to Mars. It's actually the third. Um, so the way the way this whole thing is structured is it's told in the form of weblogs mostly, or mission logs from a man who survives a disaster on Mars. Um, what happens is 6 days into this manned Mars mission, a sandstorm hits, wreaks havoc. They realize they're given the abort order and they have to leave. And so, in transferring to the launcher, this one member of the team, Mark Watney, um, basically gets slammed by an antenna and impaled. And because things are getting so close to basically stranding everybody there, um, the commander has to make the tough decision of we need to leave him behind, and leave him for dead, because they pretty much assume that he is dead at this point. So they launch and leave him, but he is not dead. Um, his suit has actually done some pretty amazing things in order to keep him alive long enough for him to regain consciousness, make his way back to the Hab, which is the habitat where they are living, and basically start puzzling out a way to keep himself alive for 4 years on Mars in order to be alive when the next mission comes to Mars and can possibly rescue him. And the whole thing is told primarily through his mission logs, and he details everything that he's doing to keep himself alive in pretty interesting detail. But um, he goes into the science, but not so much that your brain is like swimming from weird terms. He'll detail some stuff, and then he'll explain what that means in layman's terms. And so it was very easy to sort of follow along, but at the same time, like, really get into it. Um, what I really liked was his narrative voice, because the character Mark Watney is a very snarky and a very humorous guy. So he is constantly making jokes about his situation. He's constantly making pop culture references. Um, he's bemoaning the fact that the only music that is with him on Mars is a collection of disco songs that were left by the commander. Um, and that the only other entertainment he has is 70s TV shows. So, um, it's funny hearing him comment on that. And then eventually, um, the perspective changes to what's happening on Earth. And the people at NASA, um, basically, they turn their satellite images on the mission site to try to assess the damage and see what, if anything, is salvageable for possibly an extra Mars mission. And in doing that, they look at the way things are laid out and realize that somebody is still alive down there. And so then it becomes this wild race, this wild story of NASA and JPL doing a lot of political maneuvering with a lot of different space agencies to try to cobble together some kind of rescue mission, which has never been done before. So there's a very sort of Apollo 13 feel to it, where everybody is coming together trying to find a way to save the life of somebody who is millions of miles away in a completely inhospitable environment. And it's very intense, because while Mark is basically living day to day, struggling to stay alive. Well, I don't want to say struggling, but constantly coming up with ways to keep himself alive, and then encountering problems along the way. Some small ones, some really major ones, and then trying to come up with ways to reestablish communications with Earth in order to like possibly get some some pointers from NASA to help him stay alive. And at one point, one of his requests from NASA is, "Please God, anything but disco. Please, for the love of God." Um, but their data stream is too small, so he's kind of stuck with the disco music, which I sort of feel like that could probably drive somebody insane. But he handles it well, and so the whole story takes place over the course of about a year and a half. I won't spoil how the ultimate rescue mission ends up going down, um, but it's very cool. There's a bit of cloak and dagger, um, and there's actually a bit of a mutiny, but I won't say how or why. But it's very well done. There's a lot of great characters in this. Everybody from the Mars mission. It's called Ares. Um, they're all really cool characters. All the people at NASA are very cool characters. You have the head of NASA, who is really trying to walk like a fine line between what he can or cannot say to people. You have the head of media at NASA, who has very unrealistic expectations what of how to publicize or what Mark can give them in order to get the most ratings out of this disaster. Because of course it's the number one talked about subject on Earth is the guy stuck on Mars. Um, so you see a lot of that publicity, which also gives it a very Apollo 13 kind of feel to it, where basically everybody in the world is like glued to their television sets, or at this point their computers, just hanging on every new development in the Mark Watney saga. Um, and then you have a bunch of people who like really are just like hardcore nerds trying to save this man's life. Um, and it's got a it's very riveting. It's totally engrossing. The narrative voice is one of the best I've read in a long time. Um, and and it really and it's intense for most of it, where like you're rooting for him, you're with him, and then something bad will happen, and oh my god, do you feel it along with him? Um, and and then when it finally gets to the actual rescue mission, it's like every step of it is touch and go. Um, Ravanger is asking, does he have family on Earth that he manages to get in contact with? Not really. In this story, Mark, he has his parents, but he doesn't have a wife and child or anything like that. He's able to get messages. He's able to get pre-recorded messages out, but he's not able to talk with them one-on-one because of the very limited data stream that he's able to establish between himself and NASA. So it's mostly in the form of emails that he sends back and other more improvised communications, which are totally weird and I won't spoil. Um, Unfortunately, in this story, his family kind of takes a little bit of a back seat to everything else that's happening with NASA and with JPL, and they don't play a very big part in it because, like I said, it's pretty much just his parents. Um, and and Mark does talk a lot a bit about if he survives, he is he is definitely like getting out there and partying, uh, which we all know what that means. Um, so yeah, so I absolutely love this book. I had mentioned earlier on as a warning to some people that there are a lot of f bombs in this book, which may offend people. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that going in. There is very coarse language in it. I won't say that it's like gross or like foul for the sake of being foul, but it's definitely there are definitely f bombs in there. There's definitely a lot of swearing in it, but it's always sort of within context and like I said, never gross and never there just for the sake of being uh, for the sake of shock value. So, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware. That sort of thing doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. So, so it seems to me that many people in the chat have not read this yet, which I totally understand. We've all been distracted. Ugh. We've all been distracted this month with a little movie that came out um, a couple weeks ago. Even the show has been distracted by it since we talked about it for 2 weeks in a row, which I'm not talking about it anymore. I've said everything I need to say about it. Um, so, uh, so that's The Martian in a nutshell. Um, uh, so, so, like I said, I love this so much. I actually read through it twice, which is a rarity for me with books. Like at least that quickly. Um, if I like a book, I might revisit it a couple years later after enough of it has sort of left my memory that it comes back fresh, like uh, like with the Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, which at this point I've read so many times. There's very little new in it for me, but I still enjoy it. Um, but yeah, so my phone is doing something. Oh well. Um, Ravander is saying we geek too much. There's no such thing as too much geeking. You can never geek out too much over anything. As this show has proven over the last year, I think that we geek out over so much. I mean, we've gotten distracted from books onto other subjects so many times over the course of the last year on this show, and I blame a lot of it on you, Jan. You and your damn Batman. Um, but I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that you all have had fun too. Um, so let's why don't we switch gears from The Martian? If you started reading it, I would say keep with it. I think you'll really enjoy it. Um, if you are if you haven't started it, I mean, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Um, so definitely do try to check it out. This book was definitely like this book hit me where I lived really because I am a space nut and I love like as much as I love Tolkien and I love fantasy storytelling and big epics like that. Um, what I what I really love the most is science fiction, and not only that, but science fiction that really goes into that really focuses on the science. Um, that sort of thing always fascinates me, and especially stuff that has to do with space and space travel. So, I mean, this book was definitely like right in my wheelhouse, and it did not disappoint. I loved every minute of it. So, so yeah, that's about all I have to say about The Martian. So, read it. Definitely read it. I can't recommend it highly enough. So, moving from there into our 2014 year in review, because we actually have a full year of stuff we can talk about. Yay! Um, the end of the year for 2013, I felt was a little awkward just because the show was so new and had a had only a few episodes um, online at that point. So it felt a little weird for me to really do any kind of like look back. So it just sort of came to an end, and that was it for 2013. And then we sort of like got more into it as 2014 started off. Um, and I mean, we've definitely gone over a lot of different books over the years. A couple have been Tolkien, most have been something else, and that was sort of the mission from the beginning. Um, uh, I Stole the One Ring is saying, yeah, we can talk about a we yeah, can we talk about that book of the guy getting stuck on Mars? Yeah, and Ava's saying I usually just read fantasy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Fantasy is great. Um, Ravander is saying I read whatever falls into my interest when looking at the cover, title, reading the description, and and that's a good thing too. And I have to admit that that's something that really did sort of scare me with new books for a while. Like most of my time growing up, I would only read books by authors that I knew I liked or authors that I recognized, and I was very reticent to sort of stray beyond that to try to find something new, or if I were, it would have to be from a recommendation from somebody whom I really trusted. Um, so I feel I sort of limited myself a lot growing up that way, and so I've been expanding that a lot more and sort of grabbing books that seem interesting to me, either by the cover or by the description, um, and and a lot of times it's paid off very well, and sometimes it has not. I've definitely read a couple books this year that I I was sort of like, I really wish I'd spent my time doing something else. Um, but I was looking back over all the books I've read this year, and it came out to like about 24 books that I've read this past year, which is like the most I've read since I was like in school. Um, I Stole the One Ring is asking, this is for everybody, but what book surprised you that you didn't think you would enjoy but did? Um, well, for me, uh, the obvious uh, the obvious answer to that is the one book that you recommended. I stole, which was All Creatures Great and Small. It was not the kind of book that I thought that I would read. It's not the kind of book that I thought would appeal to me, but I figured let let's take a crack at it. Let's make this a book of the month and see what other people think of it. And if it's a slog for me, then it's a slog for me. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, way more so than I ever thought I would, and so I have to thank you a lot for that. I Stole the One Ring. Um, and so there were So I actually put together a small list of the three books that I liked the least this year and the three books that I liked the most this year. And I put out some requests on Facebook and Twitter asking what some of you thought. Um, which books did you enjoy the most this year? Which books did you not enjoy this year? And Ava came back and said that the two books that she enjoyed the most this year were The Silmarillion, which you can't go wrong with The Silmarillion. And I do want to do stuff with that next year. Um, I do want to have a lot of. I do want to have some discussions about The Silmarillion next year for sure. Um, and then her other one was the Strain trilogy, which was one of the books of the month, which I believe she said she probably would not have read had it not been a recommendation from the book club. Um, so I'm glad that you enjoyed that, and thank you for that, Ava. Um, for me, uh, let's go first into the books that I didn't like too much this year, because like I said, I read a lot. Just trying to keep pace with the book club, and some of them, a lot of these were I was auditioning books for book of the month, so I was reading a lot of stuff, trying to find things that I liked or things that I thought would appeal to everybody else. Uh, and some of them did make it, others did not. Um, so here were a couple that I did not like. This first one is called Asylum. Uh, uh, Asylum was I sort of had high hopes for this because it's a horror book and a mystery book um, about um, about a kid who goes to a special college prep school. Um, the campus for some reason is built over an old insane asylum, and of course, as one would expect, things start getting weird. Things Certain mysteries start coming up. He seems to be haunted by something, and it ultimately plays out very predictably, and the ending is very bizarre and not quite where I thought where it was going, and not in a good way, because it made it seem too fantastical when I was really hoping for something that was more just supernatural and more just like paranormal. And this ended up not being that at all. So I was really disappointed with this book. So so that was one that I auditioned for October that didn't make the cut. Another one that I found rather disappointing was Hollow City, which was the sequel to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Now, that first book was definitely I absolutely loved the first book, and made it one of our books of the month. Um, and then I read the sequel, and I was very disappointed with it, and it was a shame because I was really looking forward to this. Um, but whereas the first book was very mysterious um, and sort of had like the first book had like all these puzzles to figure out and had a mystery surrounding it. Hollow City is much more action oriented and much more high adventure. Um, um, but it was not what I was hoping for in a sequel, because a lot of what made the first book so intriguing and so engrossing was just not there in the second book. Um, because most of it is them spent is spent with them trying to heal Miss Peregrine, all the while being pursued by the by these creatures. Um, but it was it was a shame that that this book um, didn't really keep pace with the first one. So that was a bummer to me. And then the last book that I found very disappointing was one that I recommended for the book of the month, Robert Heinlein's Orphans of the Sky. Now, before any sci-fi nuts like start jumping down my throat, I should say I love Robert Heinlein. I love Starship Troopers. I love Stranger in a Strange Land. Orphans of the Sky, I felt was very simplistic, um, and towards the end, like very like very misogynistic to the point where it made me uncomfortable. Um, and it was an interesting concept, but I felt that it didn't execute it very well. And I mean that's not to say anything against Heinlein. We all have duds. Um, I mean, generally he's a fantastic writer, and I usually love his stuff. This one, unfortunately, was not the case. I was very disappointed with this book. Um, so that's those were the three books that I found either disappointing or just didn't like. And a lot of people seem to be talking about the Silmarillion in the chat as books that they love, and totally agree. I love the Silmarillion, and I am going to be doing something with it next year. Somebody just posted something huge. Rovandir says, I finally managed to get my mom to be interested in Tolkien's books. She complained she didn't have any good books to read. When she is at the hospital, I dragged her to the bookstore and showed her Tolkien's books and a few others, and she seemed very interested in reading The Hobbit. Excellent. I Stole the One Ring is saying, you guys should encourage me to finish the Silmarillion. Don't worry, we're going to be doing that. There's a there is something special I have planned, which I'm going to be doing in the coming months that involves specifically the Silmarillion. Um, Light of the King is saying, I didn't read any books I didn't like this year since my reading time is precious. I only will give time to books that I know I will really enjoy. I'm not ready to go out on a limb so much yet. Um, I and I'm with you there, Light of the King. That's how I used to be, which is why like for a very long time I wasn't willing to venture out of my comfort zone as far as reading goes. Um, when you're running a book club, however, that's not really the way you want to do things. So I was definitely um, reading more than I usually do, and reading stuff that I have to say was disappointing, and stuff that didn't make the cut. Um, uh, I Stole the One Ring is saying, just keep on me. Maybe that would help. Uh, okay. I don't want to spoil too much about what I'm going to do, but it'll definitely keep you reading the Silmarillion. Um, so, going from books that I didn't like, um, a lot of what I'm seeing in the the chat is from people talking about books that they probably wouldn't have read otherwise had it not been for the book club, which is very heartening for me to know that um, people are reading stuff that comes from the book club that they probably wouldn't have read otherwise, but end up really liking. And that's like that's sort of what I feel like book clubs are best at, is giving people new book discoveries. Um, and so when I hear people say that, it makes me feel good. As for books that I really liked this year, I'll start here with this is one that I wanted to make a book of the month, but it never really quite fit in anywhere. This one is called 14 by Peter Clines. Uh, okay, so sorry, I was just looking at the chat. Everybody's still talking about books that they read this year that they probably wouldn't have read otherwise, but really enjoyed. Um, so this first book that I really liked this year, I read early on, um, and it actually came as like an Audible recommendation, and the descriptions seemed kind of interesting, so I thought I'd check it out. Um, and again, this was not a book that I was able to get into the book club roster this year. Maybe I will next year. We'll see. Um, this book, 14, is about a guy who is sort of down on his luck financially, um, and he's basically given a tip on this place that rents for really, really cheap. And he goes and checks it out, and the building, is like, it's a little shady, but for the rent that they're asking for, he's like, I can deal. And so he moves in, and then slowly, little by little, he starts uncovering weird things about the building. And he starts getting together with his neighbors to try to solve the mystery. And they delve deeper and deeper, trying to figure out what is what is going on with this building. And then when they finally do uncover it, it's such a strange reveal. But at the same time, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere, but it was such an interesting and bizarre reveal, like what is actually going on with this building, and it's also fascinating. And I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it was definitely not what I was expecting, but it didn't detract from where I thought it was going. In fact, it even made it more interesting. And it's a very hard task to create a mystery and to give enough misdirection that you to make the reader think they know where it's going, and then suddenly have it go in a completely different direction, but it still all makes sense. It all still works within what you've been told. Um, so that's what I really liked about this book. Um, so I that's it's definitely a recommendation. Maybe I'll make it a book of the month in 2015, and we can all enjoy it, or just read it on your own. There's nothing stopping you. And then the next one that I really liked was Ready Player One. And Ava was just saying um, that this was another one of those books that she probably would not have read if it weren't for the book club, but really loved it. And I'm the same way. I absolutely adored this book. Uh, it was it's fun, it's imaginative, um, it's got a great universe. It's so chock full of geek references that like you could probably go through this book like 3 or 4 times and still not catch every single one of them, or even know all of them. Like unless you're like a super 80s nerd who was just into everything and then sort of stopped once it became the 90s, um, you might be able to keep up with all the references that are thrown at you in this book. Um, but it's so much fun just like putting all that together, and also it's a great mystery. It's a great chase. There was very little about this that I didn't like. It and also the audiobook was done by one of my favorite geek icons, Will Wheaton, and he does a fantastic job. So yeah, Ready Player One, definitely one of my favorites. And then this is sort of like where where it sort of becomes like, well, of course, the book that I really loved the most this year, surprise, surprise, it's The Martian. Uh, like I was saying when we were talking about the book earlier, this is far and away my favorite book this year. Um, this was totally like in my wheelhouse. This is definitely the kind of book I would that I would recommend to everybody. It captured me from the very beginning and kept me the entire way. Um, and like I just spent the first 20 minutes of the show talking about it. I don't need to go into it again. This was a fantastic book and definitely one of my favorites. Um, Definitely my favorite for this year. So those are those are the books I didn't like and the books that I did like um, this year. Uh, and well, we had 12 books that we did as a book of the month for this year, and I have to say I liked all of them except for Orphans of the Sky. Um, I stole one ring saying, "Hey, is that guy still stuck on Mars?" Well, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the book for you, but read it. You'll see if he stays stuck on Mars, or if he gets back, or if he dies. Uh, so, what was I talking about? So yeah, like of all the books that we did as a book of the month this year, the only one that I didn't enjoy was Orphans of the Sky. All the others I really liked. I thought Tolkien's Beowulf was fantastic. Um, I the two Tolkien books that we read this year were Beowulf and The Fall of Arthur. Um, Both of which I thought were fantastic books. Little little bit of an interesting, I won't say hard read, but there's certainly a bit of a transition that needs to happen in your brain when reading it because it is written in a specific kind of verse. Both of them are, which takes a little getting used to. Um, but ultimately, I thought they were both excellent books. Um, and we'll be reading more Tolkien in the next year for sure. Like I said, there's going to be some Silmarillion stuff. There's going to be other stuff. One so I would say the most surprising book to me for this year was definitely All Creatures Great and Small. Um, I don't regret reading it for a minute. It was definitely not the kind of book that I would think to read. It's not the kind of book that I would pick up on my own. Um, but I loved it. It seemed like a lot of people really loved it too, so I was really glad to see that. Um, there was a Romander saying it's not a Torn Book Club without a bit of Tolkien stuff. Yeah, and I'm not gonna say that I don't feel bad um, when we skip over when we don't focus solely on Tolkien stuff because well, I mean we do talk about Tolkien quite a bit, of course, with Fall of Arthur, with Beowulf, with everything we've been talking about with The Hobbit this last month. Um, this is a show for the OneRing.net, so of course Tolkien is going to be in there. Um, Ava is saying I wanted to read the letters from Father Christmas again this month, but didn't have time. You know, I was thinking the same thing, and I was actually tempted to put up a couple of dramatic readings of some of the letters from Father Christmas over the month. That didn't quite happen, though, unfortunately. Maybe next year. Uh, but but yeah, so I always feel sort of weird um, when it strays from Tolkien, but I have to remind myself that even if this if this show were to focus only on the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, we wouldn't even get a year's worth of material out of it. Well, okay, maybe a year, but that'd be about it, and it would be very limited. Um, but and so and I also realize, like, just from being a member of this community for so long, that a lot of us have many different tastes and love a lot of different things. Um, and yes, we're all united by Tolkien fandom, but we don't read only Tolkien. There's so many other books out there. There's so many other stories and genres and titles out there. Um, Many of which we love. Like we've done episodes on Harry Potter. We've done episodes on Game of Thrones. Um, we've we've talked about lots of other genres, lots of other titles, and most people are into it just as much as they would be with anything by Tolkien. Um, and of course, I never I never disparage Tolkien in any way. He has given me so much throughout my life. Um, he got me into reading. Reading The Hobbit was one of the first books that I read and totally enjoyed. Um, Lord of the Rings expanded my imagination beyond anything I had ever read before. Um, um, and also got me into wanting to make movies and wanting to write screenplays because I wanted to make a Lord of the Rings movie. Unfortunately, I never actually got involved with the movie, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. I tried hard, um, but I was still happy for all the skills that I ended up teaching myself just from my love of reading Lord of the Rings. Um, so that so it was it, reading Tolkien is a wonderful reading experience. But I don't want to limit this just to Tolkien. And I felt like that one of my main goals for this year was to try to show the diverse palette that a lot of us have, um, and diverse tastes, um, and also to try to come up with some good recommendations or some good things that you may not have read otherwise, but ultimately enjoyed. It seems like I was rather successful with that, judging from how many of you are talking. Um, and Light of the King was saying one of the books that she read this year that was not book club related was As You Wish by Carrie Elwes, which I definitely want to read. That's a book about from Carrie Elwes's perspective that talks about the behind the scenes of The Princess Bride. So, and that's one of my favorite movies, and also a great book that you should read. It was the screenplay and the book were written by William Goldman, who was one of the best screenwriters in Hollywood's history. Um, so maybe we'll throw The Princess Bride in there at some point as a book of the month because that's a great book. Ooh, now I'm thinking. Rovandir is saying it would be a shame to limit it only to Tolkien when there are so many amazing books out there. And it's true. There are amazing books out there in the world, and that's sort of what I want to bring into this. And because like even among like the Torn Staffers, we talk about all different interests all the time. Different books, and it's not just books, it's movies, it's TV shows, it's all that stuff. But I mean, our tastes are so diverse, and we all come here initially because of a love of Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and the Silmarillion and everything. But it's through that initial meeting that we also learn that we love so many other things too. We have so many other common interests, and that was sort of the idea behind starting up this show, was to sort of focus on just like the wide range of interests and passions that we all have. So, what is Ava saying here? Imagine that I managed to live this long and never hear of The Princess Bride. I've seen the movie now, haven't read the book. Uh, well, seeing the movie is fantastic, but the book is really great too. Um, and and it's one of those weird things that the movie is not an adaptation of the book, and the book is not an adaptation of the movie. They were both written in tandem, basically since they were written in tandem, um, and sort of crafted into each individual medium in their own respect by the same guy. Light of the King is asking, since it is adaptation month, can you explain why the Silmarillion cannot be made into a film, and or what would have to happen for the film to be made as far as copyright and laws? That is a big question, Light of the King. Um, well, let's talk about it briefly. Um, the Silmarillion, um, I would say, is probably denser than The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings because it encompasses a huge span of time and is a collection of vignettes from various periods in Middle Earth history. All of them really good. Um, Not all of them as terribly interrelated as you might expect for like a total coherent narrative. So the best way that I could think that it would be adapted or that it could be adapted into would be some kind of miniseries, like like an HBO miniseries. I think would do really well with it. Um, the biggest problem with that, of course, as Light of the King mentioned, is the copyright issues. Because the Tolkien estate has made it very clear and stuck very firmly with it that beyond The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, nothing else by J.R.R. Tolkien will be adapted into another medium. And this partly has to do uh, with his own specific wishes that he didn't want that. And also, I think that there's a lot of bad blood between the Tolkien family and um, I don't want to say like the filmmakers like Peter Jackson, but more the producers and the studio people. Um, Ava's saying on Torn Tuesday they talked about adapting the Silmarillion and that they gave titles to the movies and everything, and that totally could happen. And I'm sure that they came up with some good ones. Knowing Cliff and Justin, they're very creative and they're very good at that sort of thing. Given enough time, I could probably do the same thing, um, but I haven't done that myself yet. Um, Light of the King is saying so the Tolkien family would have to change their minds on allowing it to be made. You see, the thing is, I don't think that that's going to happen because just from the success of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit alone, you know that they have been under enormous pressure from the studio to to give them the rights to keep this franchise going because without that, they pretty much have to rely on creating their own original material. So like we probably get like a Tauriel movie or we get like some stuff based around like the war in the north. Basically, ancillary stuff that is totally not related and is totally not part of Tolkien canon. I don't want to see movies like that. Um, so ultimately, um, I don't think that this sort of thing becomes even an option until Tolkien's works go public domain, which, if I've done my math correctly, happens in 2043. So it's going to be a while still. We've got another good 30 years. Um, we got we got another good 30 years before anything else written by Tolkien goes public domain, and then it's pretty much a free for all. Whoever can get a movie into production first is the one who wins. So that's sort of the way I look at it. So like we'll probably see some sort of adaptation of the Silmarillion in like say 2045, and who knows, maybe it'll be like some immersive holographic projection, or it'll be a direct download into our cerebral implants, or however we are taking in entertainment at that point in the future. Um, but but yeah, that's sort of what I think it'll take to get the Silmarillion in some other form than the book. Um, I sort of feel like doing it as like a movie, um, either one that encompasses it all, would make it too scatterbrained. Uh, it would be too weird. It would be like an anthology movie. Um, and sometimes it works, and sometimes that kind of thing works. Sometimes it doesn't. Um, as a series of movies, I could see it working, but I think where it would ultimately do the best is as a TV miniseries or a cable miniseries. Like I'm thinking something like on HBO, something along the lines of like Game of Thrones. I think adapting the Silmarillion in that vein would do very well and it would serve the original text very well. But yeah, that's sort of my take on it. Um, a lot of people are saying they're not reading they're not watching Torn Tuesday as much anymore. You should. I mean, I know it's tough, especially a lot of you who are in Europe with the time difference. But you should check out the archives because Justin's very good about getting those up pretty quickly, um, and they're totally worth checking out. It's Cliff and Justin are great together. They talk about fantastic things. Cliff is probably one of the most intelligent people on the subject of Tolkien that whom I've ever met, and there are a couple other surprise, all of them are Torn staffers, um, but they're very good at breaking down Tolkien, and they're very good at like sort of postulating adaptations, and Cliff is very good at it, and so uh, I would say definitely you should definitely keep checking out Torn Tuesday if you're able to. Uh, so so we're coming up on the hour, and I don't really have too much else to say except to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing next year. One of my big plans is to really try to expand this beyond just the weekly chat show. I want to do more pre-recorded stuff. Um, I want to do more dramatic readings. Uh, I want to. One of the big things I want to do is to start doing another standalone web series within this that takes a book and breaks it down chapter by chapter. Um, and it's not necessarily the book of the month because the way I'm looking at it, one book in this format could take longer than a month, much longer than a month in some cases. Um, but I think it would be cool to like sort of do a more in-depth chapter by chapter breakdown. Um, but but also do it um, outside of the live show environment so that I can focus so that I can focus on what I'm talking about and not get distracted by the chat, which happens so much on this show. I mean, I love it, but at the same time, uh, with certain things, I really do want to try to stay on topic. Um, so now everybody's asking about the book of the month, and this is where I have to say that there will not be a book of the month for January because in order for me to try to get these other things in motion, I'm going to put this show on hiatus for the month of January. Um, so I do apologize for that, but um, unlike Torn Tuesday, where you've got Cliff and Justin, and they can sort of tag team, and if one doesn't really isn't able to make it, the show can still happen with at least one of them, which makes it a lot easier to keep it going. For this show, however, it's just me. Um, so so when I want to try to do something new for the show, unfortunately, that means I need to take time away from the show. Um, so I decided that for January, this show is going to go on hiatus so that I can start working um, on these other side things that I want to bring to the show. But we'll be back in February with a new book of the month. Hopefully, some new episodes on in hopefully some new episodes on this new side project, this new chapter by chapter thing that I want to get going. We'll see how it goes. A lot of people are saying, "Okay, it looks like it's an opportunity for me to read the Silmarillion," and that's a good way to spend your January. So I just want to bring this to a close and say thank you all for such a fantastic first full year with a Torn Book Club. I've enjoyed so much chatting with all of you, getting to know so many of you. And getting and reading so much reading so much with all of you, reading all these books that I myself would probably have never read had I not been doing this show, um, which is a great thing. Um, this has been a really fun year. I want to thank you all for all your contributions and for helping me keep this thing going. Um, and so so we're not going to be here. I'm not going to be here with you in January. I'll be back in February. I hope that all of you have a great new year and have a great January. Start 2015 right with some good books. And Jan is saying I should create a Batman show. Nah, I don't think so. So yeah. So I will see you all in February, And even though I won't be here in January, I will just remind you all to never stop reading. And Happy New Year.